Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering the Arizona Department of Corrections. I covered the Arizona Mexican Mafia and Arizona street gangs in previous videos, so some of this may be a repeat for some viewers. But I tried to focus on corrections, updates, and mentioning some things I left out of those videos. I guess I totally forgot to mention Tucson in my last Arizona street gang video, but some of them are described in a book that I wrote with my brother, Steve Lucero, From Carnalismo to Chaos, Chicano Gangs and History of the Southwest U.S. So let me just say that way back in 1994, Tucson officials recognized that there was a gang problem there and instituted a plan to better control crime within the city. Since that time, problems there have been up and down. There are various Sureño gangs in Arizona, like Barrio Hollywood, who would often sport yellow and blue, and Barrio Libre, which is another very old neighborhood in Tucson. Both areas who had some members tied to the Arizona Mexican Mafia, which I'll talk about here in a minute. There's also Barrio Viejo in Tucson, one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city. Close to downtown, there is Barrio Centro 13, with 18th Street Crazy Boys La Tusa, a nickname for Tucson, who are active just above them. Members of Mara Salvatrucha are occasionally encountered in the state, usually crossing the Mexican-Arizona border to travel somewhere else. Sureños La Tusa are located just northeast of the airport, and Barrio Locos Sur 13 are just east of them. There is a clique of Easy Riders 13 just north of the airport who I think somehow migrated there from the west side of LA. There are also some Florencia 13 in the northwest part of the city, not too far away from Barrio Northside Chicanos 14. Yes, there are occasionally some Norteños in the state, but they're greatly outnumbered by Sureños. I'd say by like 100 to 1. There are some Norteños in Yuma, Arizona, and former Norteños and West Familia associates in Arizona DOC, such as William Flaco Vic of A Convict's Perspective YouTube channel, who fell off in Ariza and is presently incarcerated there. There are also independent gangs like Southside Brown Pride in Tucson. Barrios Sovaco are located in northwest Tucson and wear blue and brown. And there's Barrio Brown Pride, who was first called Barrio Local Crips. It seems there are a lot of hybrid gangs in Tucson that don't follow national norms. Tucson has some Deuce 9 Bloods, who were first called Deuce 9 Mob, that ran along a stretch of 29th Street. But the next generation turned the Set Bloods. There are South Park Family Bloods, who are mainly Mexican, and Stone Blood Gang 39th Street, who flag green and red, as are Barrio Vista Bloods. On the south side, there are gangs like Hooterville Bloods, who may wear Phoenix Cardinals attire. There are Southside Bilby Crips, named after the Bilby Road area, that are predominantly Mexican and natives. On the north side, in the Sugar Hill area, there are several active Crip sets, as there are on the east side. On the west side, there are A Mountain Crips, Mission Ridge Bloods, and West Hills Gangster Bloods, as well as Barrio Nuevo Local, who wear tan colors, so I believe they are a Brown Pride gang. There's Eastside Torrance in Douglas, Arizona, who I think are related to the Cali gang by the same name. There are La Victoria Locals in the Tempe area, and there are Chandler Vario Locals. Gilbert, Arizona has the Goons, who I believe are another hybrid gang who were validated as a street gang within the last year or so. What made this gang different was they're mostly made up of well-to-do, even rich kids. Gilbert Goons are a good example of social media being a negative influence on our youth. Evidently, rather than doing typical gang drive-by shootings, these guys preferred to go head up, fight with their fists, but would also sometimes do group bum rushes on individuals they wanted to intimidate and assault. State representatives recently approved legislation creating a new crime that could be prosecuted that has been dubbed swarming. But according to polls, this blanket term could turn out to be used for common schoolyard fights that have happened for decades in communities all over the U.S. that could punish those involved for 2.5 years in prison or even more. The Hells Angels have a heavy presence in Arizona, especially after early HA icon Sonny Barger moved there from Oakland, California, and was a part of the Cave Creek chapter. George Christie, who some say was in a leadership competition with Sonny, has a very good channel discussing past HA members, other clubs, and biker politics. My buddy Jay Dobbins rode with a pseudo chapter of a real Mexican outlaw biker gang, Solo Angeles, which is set up in Arizona, made up entirely of undercover officers and informants, and had an alliance with the Hells Angels. His books provide some good insight into the sometimes shadowy world of one percenters. I believe the Outsiders are an HA support club and have a lot of political allies listed on their website. The Outsiders are friendly with Alma MC, which is another fairly large club in the Phoenix area. The Mongols MC has chapters in Phoenix and Tucson as part of their expansion all across the United States and have been traditional enemies of the HAs. The Aryan Brotherhood of Arizona has been around for decades and has very close ties to the Arizona Mexican Mafia. Arizona prison gang connections can be very widespread, even to other states, and also goes into the BOP. There are also some Nazi lowriders, known as the Ride, that have been active in Arizona. In 2006, Aryan Brotherhood member David Bounds pled guilty to the premeditated first-degree murder of Christopher Gromberg and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Bounds shot Gromberg because he believed he was cooperating with law enforcement in the homicide investigation of another white supremacist gang member. In late 2014, Christopher Mason, also of Phoenix, was arrested in an investigation involving several others. Both the suspects and victim in this case had ties to the Arizona AB. Glenn Robert Greer was convicted by a Pinal County, Arizona jury in January of 2018 of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder and several other related crimes connected to a plan to kill a witness in a murder trial involving another Arizona AB member. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. In 2018, Charles Robbins, who was from Phoenix, was arrested and booked into jail on a murder charge. He was the second suspect to be charged with murder in the April 2014 beating death of Joshua Calkins, whose bloody body was found wrapped in a blanket and a tarp in a West Phoenix alley. It was found that the victim had been bound, gagged, and nearly decapitated with an axe after he was forced to give a phone call apology to drug dealers he had previously robbed. And the Arizona ABs picked up the contract literally on his head. The Native Warriors is a prison gang that has several members from Arizona and can be found in Arizona DOC and sometimes in the federal BOP. There are also many Native American street gangs. You can see my video on that subject if you're interested in learning more about that. Being close to Mexico, Arizona is known as a major human and drug trafficking point for several drug cartels. I did a whole series on Mexican drug cartels if you're interested in learning more about them, and some of those stories mention the state of Arizona. As I mentioned in my previous video, Grandel was one of the biggest gangs. They're based out of Glendale, Arizona. There are also several different cliques of wetback power, who I was corrected actually started in 1982. I think I said 1984. Like I said, there's a lot of information on Arizona street gangs if you want to check out my previous video. So sorry that I left so many hoods out, but it's been a long time since I visited Arizona, and all the guys I know from Marissa are now grown up and doing the grandpa thing. Please feel free to leave comments, but as has been my longtime policy, be respectful or the comment will be deleted and you may be blocked. I'll now cover some updates on Arizona prison gangs and try not to repeat too much of what was in my Arizona MA video. If you recall then, I stated that in the early 1970s there was a Hispanic prison gang called La Familia who had no connections to the Nuestra Familia in California. Eventually, two individuals from California, in particular Alvin Manny Sanchez and then Peter Pete Boy Moreno, who were previously incarcerated in CDC and part of the California Mexican Mafia, moved into the state and started educating convicts on how the MA worked back home. It was estimated that eventually 60 members joined this new clica, and they're involved in various activities inside the pintas, such as narcotics, extortion, assaults, homicide, and gambling. But by 1978, the Arizona Mexican Mafia split into two separate factions after a dispute during an August 1977 murder trial. Inmate David Fierro went to court on a homicide case and called another MA member, JB, to court on his behalf, which was a violation of their code of secrecy. Both factions made their own patch, or tattoos, and Arizona DLC had to try to sort out the mess as they battled. Soon, a black rose was earned by killing an old MA member or a new Mexican Mafia member in bad standing, also known as being on la lista. As I stated previously, many assaults and murders of members of both groups occurred, with the Arizona New Mexican Mafia eventually outnumbering and overpowering the old MA by 1995. Anyways, Some people commented on my previous Arizona MMA video that JB hasn't been a factor for a long time and is an old man who's withering away. That is probably true, but I know that Pete Boy Moreno is carrying some weight, as his family have been major players for the California Mexican Mafia and in the BOP for many years. I understand that he always had at least one soldier escorting him around on any yard since he was incarcerated there in 1979, and still has clout, which became evident as you'll see here in just a minute. The new Arizona Mexican Mafia was finally validated as a prison gang on September 30th, 1988 at Florence. During the 1980s, there was a new prison gang made up of paisas, or Mexican nationals, who called themselves Border Brothers, and the new Arizona Mexican Mafia put a hit out on them. But they ended up aligning with the California Mexican Mafia faction and Sureños that were coming into the state. The new Mexican Mafia held the upper hand, but as I stated, Arizona DOC had a very hard time keeping all the various cliques apart. Another thing I'd like to clear up is I think in my Arizona MMA video I stated that Chino Conui was Guamanian when actually he was Pinoy or Filipino. By the year 2000, several new Mexican Mafia were sent after the feds made a RICO case on the new MA called Operation Sundown. These individuals then ran into problems with the California Mexican Mafia and Sureños and the feds. But soon there were truce talks, which became ratified by 2006. The new MA decided this was a win-win situation for both sides, as more and more landed in the feds. In 2023, Arizona MA member Chad Big Casper Munoz found himself marked for death after he was placed in bad standings. Munoz's murder was carried out by Timothy Bernal Jr., who is from Phoenix, the 623 area code, which you see he has tattooed on his chin. Bernal wanted to be accepted into the new Mexican Mafia for carrying out the hit, and had previously murdered Austin Mole during a dispute over guns. In September 2025, Paul Pablo Eppinger, who is considered to be one of the main Arizona Mexican Mafia shot callers, confessed to 5 gang-related homicides committed during the 1990s. Manuel Cricket Medrano from Prison Chronicles has some pretty good info on the Arizona Mexican Mafia if you want to check out his channel. Probably the biggest person I learned about the Arizona Mexican Mafia was one of my greatest mentors, Paco Marcell, who was a pioneer in gathering gang intelligence in Arizona, as described in his book, Unmasking a New Era of Crime, Today's Career Criminals and Cartels. Paco was part of the Arizona Drug Control District's Narcotics Strike Force. It was there he discovered how the rapidly growing and evolving Mexican drug trafficking organizations were gathering intelligence on both Mexican and American police forces, and it quickly became very obvious that the good guys better do the same. But he and his partners were faced with some immediate challenges. As opposed to the LA area where he was from, much of the areas they patrolled was in the hot, sparse deserts, with plenty of nooks and crannies for the bad guys to hide out in. Bad guys would be able to see them from miles away, thus be able to scatter away quickly, creep back over the border to relative safety. Marcell worked undercover as a narc and enjoyed his time working the streets and gangster hideaways, but soon found himself working a new dangerous battlefield on the inside of Arizona's jails and prisons. Around 1975, he started working closer with Arizona prison investigators, in particular working with the Florence, Arizona Prison's Special Security Unit. By 1985, he was working with the newly founded Arizona Prison Gang Task Force to monitor the rising violence amongst the state's prison gangs. The Arizona Prison Gang Task Force monitored convict activity and even upon parole to the streets, where many of them continued to engage in violence, including murder. Paco worked very closely with the California Gang Task Force, founded by another one of my big mentors, Robert Mocha Morrell, who I did a special episode on if you want to check out his life story. Marcell saw that many investigators on the street did not realize the heavy influence that offenders locked up in Arizona's prisons had on crime on the outside. And some investigators on the inside sometimes lost sight of how much influence parolees from the prison gangs had once they returned to the streets. Thus, he became a big supporter of the Gang Intelligence and Team Enforcement Mission, or GIITEM. This group is still in operation today. Marcell was also a key part of improving the New Mexico DOC Security Threat Group program, so check out my next episode on that state. He was also a board member for the National Major Gang Task Force, formed in 1993. And when I formed the International Latino Gang Investigators Association in 2002, I asked him to be on that board, which he served on for many years. For more information on all of this, be sure to check out his book, Available on Amazon.com if you want to learn more about tracking career criminals and prison gangs. Another good group is the Arizona Gang Investigators Association, started by my good buddy Chuck Scoville. Rest in peace. And so that's all I have on Arizona DLC. I hope you enjoyed this episode and continue watching this series as we cover more prison systems in the U.S. as well as security threat groups active in each state. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.